Surf Life Saving New Zealand and the Coastguard will receive a funding boost of $63.6 million over the next 4 years. Prime Minister Christopher Luxon, Transport Minister Simeon Brown and Associate Minister Matt Ducey outlined the new funding as part of a pre-budget announcement this morning. There's been a lot of these pre-budget announcements this week, haven't there? There'll be nothing to announce come the end of May. Brown acknowledged both organisations are facing across-the-board cost increases. At the same time, New Zealand has a tragically high drowning toll and services of frontline people keeping them safe in and around the water is needed more than ever before. Around 90 people drown every year, according to the stats I've got, and the government say they are intent on seeing that number reducing. So the money will be divided, as $19 million for Coastguard, but the lion's share does go to Surf Life Saving New Zealand of $44 million. And Surf Life Saving New Zealand CEO, Steve Fisher, is with me now. Steve, good afternoon.
Kia ora, Leah.
Kia ora, nice way to end the week, Steve. This is great news.
Yeah, we're certainly super stoked, very grateful for the extra funding, which we're going to use to support our 4,500 volunteers, which are pretty much, or very much, the beating heart of surf life saving in this country.
Yeah. Was it a surprise? Because I believe that Coastguard had applied for new funding, but they weren't aware of what was being announced today. Did it come out of the blue for you as well?
Yeah, much the same for us. We had put in a budget bid. The first budget bid we'd put in quite a number of years, actually. And we were hopeful, but I certainly didn't see this coming. I was actually made aware of the announcement that was coming up on Wednesday, but I wasn't aware of any of the numbers. So
Wow.
I turned up this morning hopeful and was, really grateful for what was given.
You know, it's a fair amount. Is it what you put in for, Steve? Did you get what you wanted?
I got a lot more than I wanted, for sure. We put in for a bit extra for some of the capital expenditure, which is for our flood impact club facilities. These are clubs that were massively impacted by the severe weather events last year. But those clubs and what they need to get back on their feet is going to be considered in a separate process around emergency recovery. So in terms of what we asked for around our operating expenditure, we got a lot more than what I was hoping for, really, but about in line with what we put in for our bid. It's just that with obviously the fiscal environment, lots of organisations are putting in bids. I guess you just don't necessarily expect that what you put up will come back from the government. So we're very, very happy. Yeah.
So for our listeners, Steve, how is Surf Life Saving funded? Is it a mixture, obviously, of your government funding, but I mean, is it donors? Do you raise cash yourself? How do you do it?
Yeah, range of ways. So government's the cornerstone funder, I guess. Government funding first started in 2020, and they will now be up to probably around 2/3 of our funding. We get funding from local and regional councils as well. So during the peak summer season, our volunteers work the weekends, and we put on paid guards during the week, and councils typically fund those paid surf lifeguards during the week when our volunteers are obviously working. We get some good money from New Zealand Lotteries Grants Board and a range of community trusts. We've also got, a stable of really awesome, loyal sponsors like KFC and BP and Toyota and DHL, etc., which really help us out. And fundraising, charitable giving by Kiwis to us is a small but really valued part of our revenue.
Yeah. I mean, it takes a whole lot of people and a lot of work to get in the money. You mentioned that your volunteers or your organisation's got, over 4,500 people. What specifically is the money going to go into? Is it training? Is it equipment? I know you mentioned some of the buildings that had been, it had damage from floods, but what else will it be needed for?
Yeah, so mainly, we have a big education and training team. So you can't just sort of, as a volunteer and roll up to the beach and become a surf lifeguard. There are a whole bunch of sort of certificates that you need And then there are many of them. So if you want to drive a jet ski or operate in an IRB or drive one of the buggies that patrol up and down the beaches, there are a whole bunch of levels you have to go through to order to do that. So we'll be supporting that training, and we also do leadership development. Not just the clubs that have been storm damaged, but we have a pipeline. So if you imagine, we've got 74 clubs, right? And all are basically sitting on sand dunes right on the coast. So if you think about the maintenance costs of those harsh environments, they are incredibly expensive. And some of our clubs have been sitting there on the coast for 50, 60 years, hardly being touched. So we've got a lot of demand in that area to bring those clubs up to scratch, because actually the environment is really important to be able to bring our volunteers on. If the clubs sort of are really, really rough and cold, and that's really hard to get volunteers through the gate. So we're looking at that. We're looking at the equipment. We'll be looking at some initiatives to boost our volunteer numbers as well. Like recruitment of volunteers is something that we're going to do for the first time ever this off-season. So, there's lots of ways. The money is much needed. We've been finding it really hard to make ends meet. When funding first came in, it was designed to provide 70% of our club's operating costs. Because of inflation and other pressures, that's now down to about 50%, which means, literally our clubs are struggling to keep their lights on. So this is going to help make those ends meet.